Just before we get talking in earnest on the program this morning, let's establish something. The Controller General of Customs had said, Colonel Hamid Ali, had told Nigerians that there are two basic reasons why these borders, the land borders that is, had been ordered closed. One is to strengthen security on the home front, and the second is to also strengthen our economic interests. So one of the things we must accomplish with this conversation on the program this morning is to look at whether or not we're accomplishing these two cardinal objectives as we know it right now, even though we know this is an ongoing initiative, developing initiative. On top of all that, the federal government is saying that there is no specific time period, as it were, as to when the order will be lifted. But there are already issues emerging on account of these land border closure, economic, and so on and so forth. Nigeria is already having friction with a few neighboring countries, and then on the other hand, the federal government is saying that it has to be Nigerian first. That's what the Minister of Finance and Budget and National Planning is saying, that it has to be Nigerian first. That's some of the neighbors in the sub-region are taking Nigeria for granted. They are, as it were, reneging on the commitments to which Nigeria and these other countries had pledged support. But we're going to look at all of that in the course of the program. Let's begin from my immediate left. Felix Osarime is a lecturer at the University of Benin. Thank you for coming on the program.
Really good morning. Viewers at home, good morning. Thank you for having me on the program.
Great. Next to him is Mahmoud. Mahmoud is a politician and a political affairs analyst. I just want to thank you also for coming on the program.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
You and I have had to talk about many things, including politics, especially where it has to do with partisan politics. I want to begin with you, Mahmoud. You basically are always in support of federal government's initiatives. You always believe that the idea ultimately is to better the lot of Nigerians, at least the larger proportion of Nigerians. Now that you are aware of this land border closure, what have been your sentiments in the last few days?
Well, like you rightly pointed out, at this point, the government is still trying to get feelers and see exactly what is going on in the economy.
Right.
And also, we have to understand that ultimately it is about Nigeria. We need to secure our borders. We need to know who is going and coming, where these products that are coming in and going out are coming in from. And also, let us not forget the fact that we are talking about land borders. The sea borders that are more regulated, that is easier to keep a track of the goods, services, and people that are coming from. The air borders are still open. The sea border is open. The air border is open. So all the government is saying is, while we are unable to closely monitor the movement across these borders, let us close it and see what exactly is going on in these areas. And I think to a large extent, so far, the indication has shown that, for example, the petroleum usage in the country is more defined.
Okay.
We are talking about products like rice, which is the most volatile issue that everybody is discussing at the moment. But the controller also pointed out that the rice that is coming in from Benin, for example, is rebagged. Nobody knows the expiration time of those products. They've been preserved with chemicals that are harmful to for human consumption, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of areas that even unintended consequences have now arisen. And government is saying, look, let us continue to monitor this thing and see where the benefits are. As a consequence of this border closure, Benin Republic has now promised that any rice that is coming to Nigeria must be certified.
Okay, you said a lot of things now in one. But jokingly, somebody was saying that the conversation is so centered on rice, it now appears the only food Nigerians eat is rice. Yes. But I'm sure we understand where that element is coming from, basically. But you know, again, most times, a lot of things are shrouded in secrecy in this country, especially where it has to do with initiatives that are being, as it were, advanced by the government. Are we seeing a difference? Are we going to see a difference ultimately between this particular one and other initiatives that the government had put in place before now?
Hopefully, because a lot of the checks that have to take place at borders, at land borders, have to do with our neighboring countries.
Okay.
So the neighboring countries have to agree that what they will do ultimately will be in the best interest of Nigeria and Nigerians. And we have to see those governments agreeing that the things that we don't want, they will refuse on our behalf. That is one of the consequences of this border closure. We have such a huge landmass bordering, I think, 6 or 7 countries. And we're talking about vast expanses of land. So also we have to look at even regional agreements that say, for example, it is not proper for one country to be the staging point if the destination is another country. Niger, for example, is landlocked. If you are taking goods to Niger, it is, according to ECOWAS, it is improper for those goods to come from Benin, use Nigeria, and end up in Niger because it distorts the trade agreement.
Okay.
They should actually originate from Nigeria and end up in Niger. That's how it's supposed to work. So all these things also, we have to factor in our neighboring countries and the governments and let them key into the fact that we want to know what is going on in our territory. It's a sovereign territory. Nobody just leaves their house open. You won't just open your doors and your windows and everything. Close some areas, find out what is going on. If you are having problems, you can regulate it and then you can direct your...
Okay, I'm going to push on a few issues in the bit, but let me come to Felix now. I mean, porous borders has been a subject of discussion in this country for a long time. In fact, I'm very sure many of your students, or at least a handful of them, had written their projects along those lines. What are your findings as an academic and a researcher?
It's a good discussion we're having this morning because most times we tend to go to the gallery. And I want to actually take a cue from my co-discussant who has given a very open evaluation of the intentions of the government. And there is no state ordinarily that will allow its borders to be open to all kinds of inflow and outflow. It is not wrong. In fact, sovereign territories are recognized by their capacity to control what goes on within their territory, and they must regulate their relationship with their neighbors. Nigeria is not an island state, so we are not surrounded by water. We are surrounded by states on three sides. Only the southern part of the country is where we have the Atlantic Ocean. So we talk of Republic of Benin, we talk of Niger, we talk of Chad, and we talk of Cameroon. These are the 4 countries. One common thing about the 4 countries is that they are all French-speaking countries. Right. Okay. When Professor Freddy did this inaugural lecture, he looked at Nigeria's international boundaries, and he established like that Nigeria doesn't have a security, a defense agreement with our immediate neighbors. Yet we have defense parts with countries that are far from us.
That are not probably even within the continent.
In geostrategic planning politics, the first person you look at is your neighbor. In fact, my neighbor those days, a man from Kaduna State, Fulani man, he used to tell me, he said, your neighbor is your brother. Because it's the first person that you see. Your own blood brother may be 10 miles away, but your neighbor that is just across the world, if you have a need, is the one you will reach immediately. And Nigeria has been doing this big brother thing, carrying all parts of West Africa. We have population, we have land mass, we have resources. We didn't factor in our own national interest. As well as I don't play to the gallery and I'm not singing the government song here, it is high time we realize that we have left too many things to chance in this country. Our country is, the word we can use is an open house. Anybody comes in and goes out. Other countries, before you go in and you come out, if from the point of entry, you're already being observed, you are recorded, you are tracked, you are registered. In Nigeria, at times I go to Togo, when we go for programs, we just go to the border. Sometimes you just, you don't even show, of course, because of the ECOWAS protocol, you don't need to show your international passport. Okay. But you are given 90 days free time to stay in another part of West Africa. Yet, there should be some element of documentation. We must know who you are. And most times you just go there, they will give them 200 naira, 500 naira, you walk past the border. That is it. But on the other side, the French-speaking side, they are more meticulous. Our side has been so funny. And if you go to Semen, but at the time you sit down, you see people using sack to bring rice. They will put some in bags, they'll put some in jerry can. They will come to the Nigerian side, they pour a little bag, different kind of rice you don't know. The things that happen in that border, if you go there, you will weep. It's scandalous. On a very serious note, this is not APC government or PDP government. This is reality. We are Nigerians. The things, at least I know Semen border. I have used Semen, I've used Owode border to live and enter this country. And I know what I've seen there. And if you go to the north, I've also been to Adamawa State. I've gone through Mobi side too. the same situation. In fact, in the northern part is worse. You just speak the language I walk across. There's even element of regulation in Seme and Owode. If you go to the northern part, you will wonder whether you are in Nigeria. If you can speak the dialect of both sides, particularly the Fulani and the outside dialect, because they also have their native dialect around there, just walk across.
From all you've said in the last 3 minutes, it appears we're just scratching the surface, even with all of these initiatives we're putting in place.
We have not started. Now, let me take it down to the academic partner. I teach economic history presently, and we're discussing about Nigeria's economic policies from independence to date. And I told them that the government has put in place different development plans. The first national development plan, second national development plan, third national, the fourth national development plan. And we now started the one we call the 3-year rolling plans, when those ones did not actually achieve the objectives. And one thing about these plans, the plans are always very good. They are laudable plans. The plans in themselves are okay. Execution, implementation is always our deficiency.
Right.
And that is not imported, that is local. But as a factor of development, when the government now said, okay, let us review. I told the students that there are policies that help in a government shoring up its economy base. For example, you can use protectionism. You will increase tariffs for those goods that you can produce locally, so that your own producers will have room to blossom. They can compete fairly if you give them the enablement. You can give them funding, you can make policies, and you can also protect them, especially when they are at the startup level.
Okay.
That is simple economic policy. There is no nation that will cede its sustenance to any other nation. Even at a point, Nigerian government introduced what we call import substitution industrialization. We import as much as we can import till we get to the level of takeoff. We will do technology transfer. And I told my student police that technology transfer is the most difficult thing that you can do, because nobody develops something and gives to you free. You need to also indigenize these things. You need to know that development is internal. You have to indigenize it. So what may favor Republic of Benin may not necessarily favor Nigeria, even though we're in West Africa. We must find our own solution
Homegrown.
to our own problems. That is the situation here. So the government position is good, but there are flaws. Of course, there is something that is perfect, yet they've started with a policy. And if we look at policy beyond the issue of rice, there are a lot of things that can be properly done. What is wrong in making sure that before you cross that border, we know who you are and where you are coming from, where you are going to? There's nothing wrong with that. All we need to do is put a system there, database generation and management. The unfortunate thing is not putting the computer there. Sometimes there will be no light for the computers to work. Sometimes the data that is gathered will not be properly secured. It could be hacked. It could be damaged. Sometimes there will be just nonchalance on the part of officials. And the worst part of the story is that once a few countries exchange hands, they'll just let anything go through. So that has the porous nature of the border is not because we've never had custom, immigration, ADLE.
They've always been there.
They've been there. They've always been there since Nigeria became independent. And they're still there till tomorrow. It is whether they do their job very well. That is the challenge. So they should begin to make people responsible and active in their duties. If somebody loses his job or is sanctioned properly without actually losing the job, and the other person knows that the same will happen tomorrow, the next person knows that in the next 10 years, this thing is going to continue, that the government is using zero tolerance, these changes will come up.
Let's see a few more things we can do for these changes to happen. But again, some of the factors we're looking at here, gentlemen, are evidently systemic. Let's talk about data, which Felix has already alluded to. We understand as of today, most Nigerians still cannot get even the temporary national ID as we know it. Yet there is a plan on the ground, we understand that very well, for there to be a synergy between the Nigerian Immigration Service and the Nigerian Identity Management Commission, the NIMC. So there's going to be an integration of sorts, even to the point that your ATM data will be integrated as a chip into your national identity card. We've already seen a few samples here and there. But it will appear this whole thing has become rocket science. As it stands today, we understand authoritatively that the authorities of the NIMC will be charging 5,000 naira for replacement of cards, for example, ID cards that have been declared lost. And then, of course, 3,000 for renewal of ID cards that have expired. Millions of Nigerians don't even have to start with. Why do we have a culture, sadly, of placing the cart before the horse?
Unfortunately, government documents and identity cards are always come at a cost. The ideal is for government to subsidize it to the extent that the more indigent people are able to afford afford the service. But in a situation where we are talking about a national ID card, we are talking about a card that is supposed to be widely used and widespread. So the cost should be minimal. And like you rightly pointed out, if it is too expensive for people to afford, then the whole essence of it is lost.
Right.
The challenge we have always had in Nigeria, as far as government policies is concerned, is always the fight between even sister agencies that are supposed to be having harmonious relationships. And what now happens is that those fights cause an escalation of costs that are unnecessary. For example, we are going to make it compulsory to have the national ID card before you can get the international passport. That in itself is already a duplication right there. You are going to pay for the national ID card, then you are going to pay for the passport. And the clash that these things create, it always seems as if people don't sit down at the strategic level and decide that we want a seamless process that is going to start here, and at the end of the day we'll capture as many Nigerians as possible. Look at the challenge of even voters' cards. We've not even had the optimal collection of voters' cards. I think they said 70 million voters' cards were made the last time, and only about 25 million or 30 million were collected. So all these things are challenges that just keep on piling on top of each other. And then you have the BVN, you have the national ID card. So we really need at some point to be able to sit down and say, all of this data that is coming, how are we going to manage it? Possibly even integrate it all under one ministry that is going to be dedicated to identifying Nigerians, making it easier for Nigerians to be identified on a micro scale. Right. And then see how that can work.
The reason I ask that question is, you look at the basic everyday issue of SIM card registration, for example. I mean, I've been there, done that, as I say. I've had to register my SIM at least half a dozen times, practically over 6 times. Now, it's the same thing for most Nigerians I get to talk with about these things. And then you're asking, I mean, for how long do we have to run the same circle in such a way that we can't get data collection straight? I mean, you call customer service, I mean, your operator now, your service provider, telecom service provider, and they are going to always ask you where you're calling us from. Is this your number? What's your name? Somebody said the idea is to double check and be sure that you're the same person who called 2 weeks ago, who called sometime last year, and so on and so forth. But I think that just doesn't check out really. The reason is, while we're trying to check the borders and be sure we know those who are coming in, those who are going out, there are also deep-seated internal issues that have not been addressed at all. For example, we've talked about data now. I mean, that's an issue. We've also not looked at synergy, which you already alluded to, amongst these different agencies of government. And then strategic thinking is also another issue we're probably not looking at. I think the attention is probably always in the direction of politics.
Sorry, let me cut in here to kind of help stabilize this discussion. Our problem, as I established earlier on, it's not the issue of the idea.
We have the idea.
We have the ideas. He has made that one. You see, he mentioned synergy. And I'm going to build on that argument because I have national ID card. It took me 3 years to get national ID card. I applied for it in 2013.
That was relatively fast.
No, 3 years.
It was the Nigerians who couldn't get theirs for
well, I got my own eventually because they sent me a I followed the process. And then I got there, they showed me that it has a chip. I can use it for my account. And I asked the young lady a question. If this password that you put here is there now, how do I change? She said she doesn't know. And I said, you are giving me a card. You are telling me I can change the password. I can load my account into this card now so that I'll use it as an ATM card. She said, yes. I said, okay. How do I change this password? She said she doesn't know. I said, then if I had known you don't know, I wouldn't have signed for this card. Instantly. So eventually, of course, it wasn't an argument. She was uncooperative. So I left her eventually. But I made her to understand that if I had known, I would have left the card for her. Because if I take that card now, I'm now obligated. So I had to go and find someone else to explain. Fortunately, I met a former student who works in the NIMC who now explained to me that first, the lady in question is not even in charge of that responsibility. She was seconded to do that task. I said maybe she should have been decent enough to tell me that please, this is not my schedule. Meet the person in charge will come at such a time, come back and ask. He also explained to me how to go to the bank. I think it's Eco Bank. Where yes, it's one of, I think it should be Eco Bank, where he said you can go to the bank, do the necessary protocol, and change the password. I told him, no problem. The card is in my house. I'm not going to put my account on that card because it is risky for me. There is no data protection as far as I know, because I am in Nigeria. Even to deal with the banks that you are already relating with, it's a bit of a problem. Now, we are coming to the issue of impunity. There's so much impunity in this country. You see, you mentioned seamless synergy. It is possible. International passport is for you when you are leaving your country. That is what you take outside. Your national ID card is what you use within your country.
Right.
So there are two different things. We should be very clear. Your citizenship does not expire. So government cannot tell me that my national ID card should be renewed. But government can give a timeline and say that after this period, come back and we'll reissue for you.
Even in civilized countries, there's always
a timeline for
yes,
cards.
Exactly.
I know. That's why I use the word it doesn't expire. So government is looking at, of course, we are talking of, we'll link down to cost of governance very soon. They are always looking at how to rake in resources at the expense of the populace. If you put 3,000 at replacement cost, 5,000 for each one, people will not take. Voters card that was free, people did not take because the problem became that you can easily register. To get it, you have to now travel to your local government area. You have to go to this. If you miss a particular day, people were no longer interested. Meanwhile, I can walk into the bank right now, ask for an ATM card, they will give it to me within 10 minutes. And in fact, they will brand it with my name. It will be activated instantly. I will simply pay 1,000 naira. Why would the government now ask me to pay 5,000 for an ID card that I will like no use? Unless maybe, but now they are telling you to NECO. If you want to do NECO, you want to do JAM, your children must be registered in national. You gradually feed people into programs. You don't use this code talking method. You just bring an idea. You expect them to pay money for it. Yes, subsidy is also part of it because we already pay tax. Government should also be very, very open-minded to look at the fact that these are programs that will enable citizens to repose trust in the government. The problem here is that there is so much distrust from the populace because the government is not open. It is not a fundraising venture. It's not a revenue-making institution. But you need money to do what we call running costs. The machines have to be acquired or managed, and the data must be properly guarded. That is the most important part. The fear I always express is that the persons that will operate these institutions, they become political. They are not professionals. If you are professionally inclined, you know what your job is. But because of the excessive infusion of politics into whatever we do in this country, these policies are very good, but they do not meet maximum expectation. Okay. And that is why we are where we are today.
We need to talk more about expectation because when you have measures like this, I mean, the land border closure, as we are talking about on the program right now, it's only normal that Nigerians and other stakeholders should have an expectation. But what ultimately should that expectation be? We'll be talking about that in a bit. Stay with us.
TMI, every opinion counts.
Felix was just making a point about expectation. Ultimately, what we expect the outcome for this measure being pursued by the federal government to turn out to be. But again, in the final analysis, some people are saying that this is going to be a combination of challenges and blessing for Nigeria economically and even on the security front. We're joined by Destiny Owobu, statistician, economist. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. We've not talked about the budget yet, but let me whip out an element from the 2020 budgets.
Okay.
We understand that at least 8.33 trillion must be raked in by way of revenue.
Okay.
So ultimately we're dealing with a deficit of about 2 trillion.
Of course.
But there's a problem. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning is saying that as it stands right now, it's very unlikely that Nigeria can achieve that target from now till the end of 2019.
Yes.
And as such, the idea to shut down the land borders is not negotiable. How much of economic sense does that make?
Yeah, whether it makes sense or not depends on the outcome.
Okay.
Because sometimes there are the pros and the cons. In the short run, given by design, it's supposed to generate a lot of revenue for the country. It's supposed to encourage farmers to go into production. It's supposed to localize the foreign exchange within our country instead of taking it outside. Or it's also supposed to encourage domestic investment in agriculture to show up the gap, the demand gap. Currently, for example, in the rice production, Nigeria demands about 7 million tons of rice, But Nigeria can currently produce about 4.8 million tons. So there's a gap of 3 million tons. So if you close the border, now what that means is that there's an opportunity of 3 million tons for investors, I mean farmers, to go into and try and produce. In theory, it works. It's good like that. It's supposed to be a win for Nigeria, because it has always been a win for Benin Republic and other countries apart from Nigeria. Benin Republic has been benefiting 90% of the trade between we and Benin Republic. The trade contributes 20% of their GDP, contributes 13% to their export earnings. So it's like the big brother is big in terms of a market for Benin Republic, for instance. So we have not seen the gains in Nigeria. It actually immeasurizing Nigeria, because how can a country with 11 million people be our biggest threat when it comes to bringing goods to Nigeria? So the Republic has been seen as a conduit pipe to send goods to Nigeria illegally. I mean, through the borders. I mean, overrun the country through Benin Republic because we are closed. So government closing it for security reasons is very good. Secondly, we also hope that it's going to encourage a lot of production to show up, to encourage people to go into production. That is in theory. But the problem with most of these theories is that the outcome is all about sustainability. Like I told you before in this program, our policies in Nigeria usually stopgap. Before you develop a policy, you must have a long-term perspective. You must have a general principle that you a general objective you intend to achieve, and you must have a timeline with which you intend to achieve that objective. Now, for example, now you have noticed that the price of food products have increased because of this short problem. But in theory, we also predict that in the couple of next 6-7 months, the prices will crash. Because when it goes up, it means people need to increase supply. And when you increase supply, the price will go down. What happens when we open the borders again? That's the question. When are we going to open it? What are we trying to achieve with closing the border? What's the timeline? What do we expect to achieve in the process? What policies are put in place to ensure that we increase the domestic supply of those products to show up the demand, the supply to meet demand? And what happens after that? Those are the issues. Because in the end, national security should come first before any other consideration. It is true that we have bilateral relations and multilateral agreements with other countries, Africa, but we must have a win-win perspective. It must not be a win-lose. Anybody that does business with Nigeria, as it is now in the current milieu, is always in the win, while Nigeria is in the lose, because we don't produce anything. We are actually an import-dependent economy. So what the government is trying to do, if you look at it from the long-term perspective, what they intend to achieve is to make Nigeria a producer nation in terms of domestic supplies like agricultural products and things like that. So when they close the borders, economists understand what they're trying to do. But the question is this: what happens when there's a flip-flop? What happens when the government decides to say, okay, let us open it again?
Yeah, it's good that we're talking about what happens going forward, but let's talk about something that's already happening right now, which is the fact that there's a pretty good chance that this measure, as we know, it is already pitting Nigeria against its neighbors in the sub-region, particularly Ghana. The government of Ghana is saying that your goods are coming into our country, but conversely, you're not allowing our goods to enter your country. That has economic ramifications, doesn't it?
It does. It does, but sometimes when there's a conflict between a nation, in diplomacy, between a nation and other nations, you don't look at the sentiments or what. We shouldn't be listening to what the Ghanaians are saying. We should be listening to what the international community is saying and how it's going to affect us. Now, the question is this: what is the economic impact of Ghana dealing with us in the first place? That's the first question you should ask. That's the bigger question. What do we lose if Ghana is offended? Those are the issues. Those are the big issues. What do we lose if all the African countries are offended? I'll give you a fact. Only 1% of transactions exist between Africans. The total volume of trade that Africans have with European trade is about 90%. Only 1%, 10% of transactions within Africa, exist within Africa itself.
The entire continent of Africa.
The entire continent of Africa. So if the whole Africa choose not to buy from Nigeria, for instance, or do business in Nigeria, it doesn't give us, it's not a threat. It's not a threat. So we must look at it from that angle. It's not a threat at all in the short run, because Nigeria presently does not do big trade with Africa. If they even do trade, as it stands now, I just told you Benin Republic, for example, and others, they are the ones that benefit from such trade relationships, because Nigeria has a big market for any African country. Look at South Africa and Nigeria, for instance. We do trade with South Africa, but the trade is lopsided in favor of South Africa, not in favor of Nigeria. The same thing with the same Ghana you're talking about now. Ghana's population is just about 30 to 40 million. Nigeria is 201 million people. It's a big market, small market economics. The question is this: if Ghana is offended, Yes, we understand that, but we must develop a strategy to ensure that it is a win-win. That's the objective, a win-win. So we must find out how we can balance the scales to ensure that our trade is in the positive with these countries. So they are offended. Yes, of course, we expect them to be offended, but we must look at it. It's like China and America. The Chinese are offended because the Americans are doing this and that, but if you look at the big economics of it, we have the idea of what they call Trumpism now. The idea is to develop American economy to make sure that China is no longer the factory of the world, because that's where the whole world is moving towards. And the thing is harming the American economy. Whether you like it or not, it's harming the American economy because there's unemployment in America and things like that. And Trump promised his people, I'm going to be for you people. And all the fundamentals, all the statistics show that the American economy is doing better than it was.
And incidentally, one of the plans on which Trump came into power in 2016 was American first, right? And Nigerian Minister of Finance now is also saying Nigeria first. Yeah, but I noticed something just a while ago. I'm going to come back to you, Ahmed, in a bit. But when you mentioned diplomacy, I saw that Felix looked in your direction. This has diplomatic implications too, because it will appear tensions raging gradually.
Conflict is normal in relations. I teach conflict too, and I tell my students, and I tell the public, and I tell any person that cares to listen that even as we were growing up, we were told that if you do not quarrel, you don't know the real intent in people's mind. These things are necessary. He just came in, he's already pointing at what we have been discussing up front, that Nigeria has allowed herself to become the dumping, in fact, it's the biggest market in Africa to start with. We have the biggest market in Africa. Now, everything comes into Nigeria. What do we really produce? We are trying to bring protectionism. I use protectionism just now. And by doing that, what do you simply do? You increase tariffs. But you see, we have to be very careful too. Let me take it back to history now, before I bring it back to diplomacy. Between 1804 and 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte brought what we call the continental system in Europe. And what did he do? He shut out Britain. The British were the first to industrialize in Europe. So he shut out Britain, and he started the continental system such that other European partners would buy mostly French goods or other European goods on the European mainland. Britain is an island state, so Britain should not come and sell on the mainland. The British did not really bother anyway because they had extensive colonial powers at that time. America was already their close friend. Canada is there for them. Nigeria, Gold Coast, India, South Africa, all these were British dependencies. Hong Kong. So the British did not bother about the mainland Europe. They had a global market, so they faced the other side. Just as he mentioned, and that's what Nigeria should do actually. You don't listen to those things that don't really count. In any case, the continental system failed on account of Napoleon in France because two things were very critical here. British goods were of superior standard compared to what France and other European powers were making. So the European public noticed, or they knew already, that the British goods were better. They preferred to buy smuggled British goods than to buy the ones made locally that were of no standard, or that were of substandard or of lower standard. That is where we are having a problem, which is what he was pointing out. We need to develop our internal productive capacity. I said one thing yesterday that in psychology, when you are linking somebody from drug user, you don't use cold talking. You don't just take a drug addict away from the drug. If you use cold talking, the person will go into relapse, and the person may suffer other serious health implications. What you do, you gradually withdraw the person. Nigerian government takes decisions sometimes in a hurry. We should be strategic. We are tactical. Tactics is immediate response to a situation. Strategy is that you plan 10, 20, 30 years. Where do we intend to land? If we do this, because we also do permutation, and in this you use the mathematical model. If I make this move, where will it take me? Chess and draft. We play chess, we play draft. We don't really know that these are things that you use for
real
policy.
Life issues.
You use it for policy planning. For every move, there's a counter move. For that counter move, there's a counter to the counter move. You plan it ahead. A good chess player knows the entire moves on the chessboard. Our government officials, those at the planning level, they don't think like that. They are thinking of the political. That's why I said that we are too political. We should be professional and strategic. The Nigerian government should not just say we are locking land border. We have protocols anyway. They are already arguing that there are ECOWAS protocols. We are saying that you violated some protocols. We also begin to violate some protocols. We should say, we would have given a timeline between this period and this period. If this thing do not adjust to this level, we will do this. You've given them notice. You put everybody on alert. Everybody is now ready, waiting. So you are now saying if you did not adjust, we cannot be a receiver state. if 90% of the vehicles that go to Republic of Benin, they end up in Nigeria. And we have our own seaport. That's lost. And these vehicles are smuggled into the country through different loopholes in our land area. The immigration and customs tell you that they don't have enough personnel. They keep saying they don't have enough personnel, but they keep showing people that they arrest on television. Those vehicles and those rides, where do they end up? We don't know. They still come into the same market. People prefer to even buy smuggled goods. So we don't have a local production capacity. We cannot suddenly lock the border and say things will change overnight. That's why right now local rice is as expensive as the smuggled.
So what you're saying is this measure is too drastic.
Yes.
It is necessary, but it wasn't well thought out. That's why I said there was a flaw earlier on. And those flaws can be corrected. For example, before you delink, you would have brought in something. You can say, okay, we've imported so much tonnage of rice. Before this tonnage is exhausted, we must make production to reach this level. And the government will now bring seedlings, put in policies, bring agricultural experts, go to the farms, use extension services. It's not just to say it in Abuja or in Lagos and sit down inside a condition office and swivel on your chair. And you say it on NTA. That is not what we need. The man on the street understands survivor very well. If he gets the rice and he knows that the government official is coming to monitor him, these days you use photographs, you use cameras, they will wake up to reality. But you give them these items because you say, oh, these are the people in my constituency. It now becomes a political matter again. It's not a national matter. It is not a human matter. It's not a civil society matter. Everything becomes too political. Remove it from that level. We need to produce rice for us to live. We need to produce rice because it's almost becoming our staple. It's even easier to eat rice than to eat eba because eba is becoming more expensive. You need to make soup. The rice, you can just put oil, put granite oil, put a little pepper.
Somebody said you need to, for you to have eba, they have to be passengers.
Imagine. so these are the little things we are all aware of. The government sits up there, very far from the people, and government is responsive to the yearnings, expectation of people, and government is supposed to channel direction for them. We should come back to that.
As we wrap up now, I'm going to make Ahmed just add to what you said now. A lot of persons have also pointed to a disconnect, whether it's perceived, whether it's tangible, but at least they've talked about a disconnect between the government and the people. They attribute the, as it were, inability or failure or refusal of government to think strategically, to think long-term, to the fact that there's a de-link, as it were, between the government and the people. And then there's also the argument of how that when you have border closure, land border closure like this, in all likelihood, it's going to encourage smuggling and other sorts of conspiracy that would be like a boomerang for governments and, of course, the country.
Yes. To address your first point, let me go on the back of what Felix said. And to illustrate your point too, to understand the de-link and the politicization of this process, look at, for example, the Controller General is talking about closed borders.
Right.
Now, instead of the customs officials that are already short-staffed to go and man the borders, they are inland. They are arresting people who have already successfully smuggled vehicles into the country.
I even on their way to deliver those vehicles.
On the way that's one side of it. Now, this is even the worst part of it. Some of those vehicles were actually cleared through the seaports.
Lagos border.
But they will stop you and tell you have not paid enough duty. And there will be a signature of one of their colleagues on that paper. They will not go and penalize the colleague. They will punish the person that has the vehicle and has paid, even though not up to the amount of duty he should have paid, but he has paid something. So that is the disconnect that you're talking about, illustrated right there. Government needs to be able to say, this is the beginning of the policy and this is the end of the policy. If a vehicle has successfully made it into the country, let us assume that they got the best of us and move on. But when you are using the manpower that you should be using to reinforce your policy at the borders, inland, it does not make any sense. So these are some of the things that he has pointed out, that it's a good policy, but there are still gaps that they need to highlight.
Of course.
It's like talking about, instead of going to the hospital to treat the problem, you are waiting at home for the situation to get bad, then you call the doctor. That's not how it works. And so this border closure, like the question you raised about border closure bringing out other things, it's only natural that, like, let's use this metaphor. When one door closes, another opens. So of course,
we're not opening too many wrong doors. Yes, that's the concern Nigerians are having now.
The only way we will know the ones that are open
is to open them first.
Yes, and this is where we are. So we have to believe that what government is doing is in the better interest of the country. And if we do that and we try and play our own part, but highlight the areas that we feel that there needs to be focused on, I think we will get to where we are going.
Okay, let me lastly come to Destiny now.
Yes.
There's already a policy in place, already being enforced for closure of land borders. But there are other measures, maybe a bit more stringent than this even, that government must consider going forward, especially if we have to strengthen our security architecture and then, of course, jack up revenue sources, right?
Yes, there are others. For instance, although they will be draconian, this is more draconian than any measure you can have. The second measure may be to increase tariffs, which is against the ECOWAS protocol and other agreements. I think, like he said, we should be strategic. Anything we do, we must have a timeline. The government should be thinking long term, and we should give, because we have what we call expectations, we should allow the market or the entire world to respond to our policies according to mathematical design. For example, before you close the borders, Nigerians, most people did not see it coming like that. You must have identify the problem, strategically state what you are trying to solve. Before Trump, for instance, began to fight China, it was clearly identified the trade imbalance between China and the United States. The issues were on television. They were debating it. How do we close 200...
It was even a strong campaign issue.
Yes, a strong campaign issue. How do we close $200 billion worth of imbalance with a country? You see, that discussion, even the Chinese must have had the opportunity to anticipate it.
And get ready for it.
And get ready for it. Okay, that's one. So secondly, you must also state what exactly is the problem, what do you intend to achieve with the problem, and then you give the other countries opportunity to correct it. Because actually, we are not just trying to close the borders just to make money. We are closing the borders mainly because Nigeria is being overrun. It's not a dumping ground through these other countries. It's not a dumping ground. And no country for any reason, diplomatic or whatever, allows its space to be a dumping. We call it predatory dumping. When you allow your country to be overrun by substandard products, fake products, and things like that, you discourage enterprise in your country. Because there is a farmer somewhere in Adamawa trying to grow the same rice, and then this rice comes from Thailand and passes the back door through Benin Republic and comes to Nigeria, and the Thailand appears crisp in your eyes. People are not interested in health in this part of this world. We look at the rice and we say this one must be the best because it appears great.
Shiny.
It's shiny, and because they have the technology. And if you allow that, your industry will die. So we get the point, but you should be able to state that this is the problem, this is how much we lose in this current arrangement, and this is how much we intend to save. So in the next 2-3 years, we are going to effectively cover up this demand gap. And then this country should try and protect the borders and try not to use Nigeria as warn them, give them red lines not to cross. Once they cross it, by the time you take action, the world does not see it as you are being bossy. The world sees it as you are being strategic. You gave the red line, they crossed it, and then you moved.
And maybe there's even an indication you want to have a dialogue about it.
A dialogue about it. Sometimes you can even throw a policy that you don't intend to follow just to see the reaction and measure whether it affects another country. For example, the Benin Republic issue, now they're already crying. And why are they crying? It should send us a message that something was missing in the process. There was a hole in our economy that they were profiting from.
Which we must block.
Which we must block. Just the discussions around this shows that Nigeria is important in that area. So we should look at it strategically and find a way to solve it in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's not something that you just solve. Just watch. In the next couple of months, they will open the border again.
I'm not going to talk to you guys about policies of assault because I know Felix, for example,
yes,
is going to give us a 2-hour lecture on that. And time will fail us to be his students in that class. But I want to thank you, gentlemen, especially for coming on the program. But there's a takeaway from this discussion. First, we must have a goal we want to accomplish with every policy. There must be a timeline. There must be a plan towards achieving that policy. And then, of course, Ahmed particularly talked about how that there must be strategic level thinking, especially on the part of those who are behind these policies within governments. Just to add to maybe borrow from what Felix had said, maybe those who think on behalf of government should play more chess, right?
Well, they can play drafts.
Well, we can start from somewhere.
Draft is localized. At least, if you say chess, it will be very foreign game. Let's just bring it homegrown.
Okay.
Use drafts.
Let's play more drafts. Felix Osarime, thank you for coming. Ahmed Mahmoud, thank you for coming. And Destiny Womo, we appreciate you guys. Enjoy the rest of the day.